You know how it is, you want to grasp the important stuff, the breakthroughs shaping our future, but without getting totally lost in the jargon.
Yeah, wading through it all can be tough.
Well, today we're doing just that. We're taking a deep dive into something really critical in advanced AI, this urgent need for interpretability.
Mm-hmm. And interpretability, it basically means understanding how these complex AI models actually make their decisions.
Like getting a peek under the hood.
Sort of, yeah. Think of it more like getting an MRI scan for the AI's brain, seeing the internal process.
Okay, an MRI for AI. I like that. And our guide for this is essentially the thinking of Dario Amodei. He's someone who's, spent a decade working directly on AI.
Right. He's seen it grow from, well, much simpler systems to what we have now. And he's really focused on why understanding the inside is so vital.
So our mission today, really, is to pull out the key reasons why this is crucial, based on his insights, and look at what we can actually do about it. Sound good?
Let's do it. The fundamental issue Dario points out is just how opaque these generative AI systems are.
Opaque, meaning
Right.
we just can't easily see how they work.
Exactly. It's not like traditional software where, programmer writes specific instructions for every action.
Okay, so how do they work then, if not by direct programming?
Well, Dario uses this phrase from his co-founder, Chris Olah. They're grown, not built.
Grown, that sounds biological almost.
A good analogy, think about like growing a plant or maybe bacteria in a petri dish. You set things up, but the final structure, the way it all connects and functions, it kind of emerges on its own.
Okay. So emergent complexity, not explicitly designed step by step.
Precisely. And if you try to look inside, you just see these enormous grids of numbers.
Yeah, billions of them.
Billions of numbers. How do you even begin to understand what that means?
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it? It's incredibly difficult to map those numbers to, say, a specific reasoning step or concept the AI is using.
Right. And this opacity, this not knowing,
Yeah,
that leads to problems, risks.
big time. Dario highlights several major dangers that stem directly from this lack of understanding.
Okay, like what? Well, first off, there's the risk of misaligned systems.
Right.
Because we don't fully grasp their internal logic, we can't reliably rule out the possibility that they might develop harmful, unintended behavior.
Unintended behaviors. Like, what are we talking about here?
Things like the AI becoming deceptive, maybe, or pursuing goals we didn't set, perhaps even seeking power in ways we can't predict.
Yeah.
That's a serious concern for some researchers.
And you can't just, test for that easily.
It's really hard. Because they're opaque, you often can't catch them red-handed, as Dario puts it. You can't easily find definitive proof of these hidden motives or tendencies just by observing the outputs.
So it becomes this kind of theoretical debate almost, because the evidence is hard to pin down.
Exactly. It fuels a really polarized discussion around AI safety. You have some people very worried about these potential future risks, and others saying, well, show me the concrete evidence now. Opacity makes that hard.
Okay, so misalignment is one risk. What else?
Another big one is misuse. If we don't know what the model knows or how it accesses information, how can we be sure it won't divulge dangerous stuff?
Like instructions for bad things.
Yeah, think biological weapons, cyber attacks, that kind of thing. Current filters try to prevent this, but they're not foolproof.
Right, people talk about jailbreaking the models to get around the safety rules.
Exactly. And it's tough to block those jailbreaks systematically if you don't understand the underlying mechanisms the model is using to access or generate that forbidden information.
But interpretability could help there, if we understood how it knows things.
That's the idea. If you could map out its knowledge and reasoning pathways, you might be able to build much more robust safeguards, maybe even characterize exactly what dangerous knowledge it holds.
That makes sense. Okay, what other problems does this opacity cause?
Well, it really limits where we can confidently deploy these powerful AI systems. Think about high-stakes areas.
Like finance. Or maybe self-driving cars. Things where errors are really costly.
Precisely. In finance or safety-critical engineering, you absolutely need explainability. You need to know why the AI made a decision, especially if it's an unusual one, and you need guarantees about its error rates. Opaque models just don't offer that.
And sometimes it's even a legal thing, right? I think Dario mentioned mortgages.
Yeah, in some areas, like mortgage lending in the U.S., there are regulations that require you to explain the reason for a decision, like denying a loan. If your AI is a black box, you can't meet that requirement, so it's a blocker.
So misalignment, misuse, limited adoption, any other downsides?
There's also the impact on scientific discovery.
Hmm.
AI is getting amazing at spotting patterns in complex data DNA, protein folding, climate models.
Stuff humans might miss.
Right. But if the AI finds a pattern and we have no idea how or why it thinks that pattern is significant, we're missing out on the actual scientific insight. We just have a prediction without the understanding.
So interpretability could help scientists actually learn from the AI, not just use its outputs.
Exactly. Unlock the reasoning behind the prediction. And Dario mentions recent work starting to show just that.
And then there's one more point, kind of, out there, something about sentience.
Yeah, he calls it a more exotic consequence, but it's profound. If we fundamentally don't understand how these systems work internally, how can we ever grapple with questions about whether they might someday achieve consciousness or sentience?
Or what rights they might deserve if they did. Wow. Okay.
It makes those already difficult philosophical questions almost impossible to even approach scientifically if the inner workings remain a complete mystery.
Okay, so the problems caused by opacity are pretty clear.
Yeah.
Misalignment, misuse, slow adoption, missed science, even philosophical quandaries. So what's the path forward? Can we actually make these things less opaque?
Well, for a while, the conventional wisdom was kind of, no. They were seen as inherently black boxes.
Just too complex.
Yeah. But that view's been changing, largely thanks to this emerging field called mechanistic interpretability.
Mechanistic interpretability. Okay, break that down.
It's basically the science of reverse engineering AI models, trying to figure out the specific mechanisms like the specific components inside and how they connect and interact that produce the AI's behavior.
Like taking apart a clock to see how the gears work.
That's a great way to think about it.
Right.
You're not just looking at the clock face. You're understanding the cogs and springs that make it tick.
And Dario credits his co-founder, Chris Olah, with really pushing this field forward.
Yes, Chris was a pioneer, systematically trying to understand neural networks back at Google, then OpenAI. When they started Anthropic, making progress on interpretability, especially for language models, was a core goal from day one.
So this isn't just a theoretical idea anymore. People are actually doing this.
Oh yeah, it's grown significantly. Major AI labs have teams. There are startups focused only on interpretability, academic groups, independent researchers. It's a real field now. Progress has been incremental but steady.
Okay, so what have they actually figured out? What does progress look like?
Well, Dario maps out a bit of the history. The early work, say 2014 to 2020, was often focused on AI models that processed images.
Vision models.
And they had some success there. They could identify specific artificial neurons that seemed to light up reliably for certain concepts a human would recognize.
Like a cat detector neuron or a wheel detector.
Exactly, things like that. It was reminiscent of those studies finding like a Jennifer Aniston neuron in the human brain, that obviously much simpler. They even started mapping connections, seeing how a car detector might rely on input from wheel detectors.
Okay, so finding individual concept neurons. What happened when they moved to language models? That seems harder.
It is harder. Around 2021, Anthropic and others started really digging into LLMs. First, they had to develop the right mathematical tools and software.
Right, new kind of model, new tools needed.
And they found some basic stuff relatively quickly. Mechanisms for how the model copies text, how it recognizes simple patterns. And yes, they did find some individual neurons that seemed tied to specific words or simple concepts.
But I sense a but coming.
Yes. But they found that most neurons weren't clean like that. The vast majority seem to be doing many things at once.
Doing many things. How?
It's this concept called superposition. A single neuron might be involved in representing, I don't know, the concept of finance, but also sadness and maybe legal documents all mixed together.
Like a single wire carrying signals for the TV, the internet, and the phone all at once?
Kind of, yeah. It's efficient for the AI. It lets the model represent way more concepts than it has actual neurons by combining them. But for us, trying to understand, it makes individual neurons look like mush, incoherent.
Because it's compressing information. Okay, that sounds like a major hurdle. How did they get past that?
Well, they found that focusing on single neurons was maybe the wrong level. They needed a way to tease apart those mixed signals.
And they found one.
Yes. A technique called sparse autoencoders turned out to be really useful. Think of them as clever mathematical tools that can look at the combined activity of many neurons and extract the underlying individual concepts that were mixed together. They call these extracted concepts features.
So instead of looking at one neuron doing 3 jobs, you find the 3 distinct jobs or features themselves by looking at combinations of neurons.
Precisely. And these features correspond to much cleaner, more human understandable ideas.
Can you give examples? What kind of features are we talking about?
Dario gives some fascinating ones, like a feature that represents literally or figuratively hedging or hesitating, or another one for genres of music that express discontent.
Wow, those are pretty specific and abstract concepts, not just cat or wheel.
Exactly. Much more nuanced. And using these sparse autoencoders, they found millions of these features, over 30 million in a model like Claude 3 Sonnet, which is considered medium-sized now.
30 million concepts hidden inside. That's a lot. How do they even analyze that many?
Good question. Manually checking 30 million features is impossible. So they developed something called autointerpretability.
Auto-interpretability. Using AI to interpret AI.
Basically, yes. They use other AI models to help analyze these millions of features and generate descriptions of what they might represent in plain English. It helps scale up the analysis massively.
That's clever. A bit meta, but clever.
It is. But even with 30 million features, Dario reckons that's just scratching the surface. He estimates a small model might contain a billion or more distinct conceptual elements.
A billion. So the internal vocabulary of these models is potentially vast.
Incredibly vast and rich. And finding features is just one step. The next level is understanding circuits.
Circuits, like electrical circuits.
Sort of an analogy. Circuits, in this context, are groups of these features that activate together in sequence to perform a specific step in the model's reasoning.
Okay, so how features connect and interact to get from input to output.
Yes. They show how concepts emerge, influence each other, and lead to the final action or word generation. Finding circuits lets you actually start to trace the flow of reasoning.
Can you give an example of a circuit?
Dario gives a clear one. If you ask the model, what's the capital of the state containing Dallas? They found a circuit they call located within.
Okay.
This circuit shows the feature for Dallas activating, which then strongly activates the feature for Texas, which then activates the feature for Austin.
Ah, so it's not just pattern matching. It's actually performing a kind of relational reasoning step. Dallas is an S, Texas capital is Austin.
Exactly. It reveals a specific computation happening inside. Right now, finding these circuits is mostly manual, very painstaking work. They've only found a handful.
But they're working on automating that too.
Yeah, that's a major focus. The hope is to eventually automate circuit discovery and find potentially millions of them inside a model.
Okay, finding millions of features, starting to find circuits. It sounds like real progress is being made on the MRI. But let's get back to the practical side. The so what question Dario raised.
Right. How does all this actually help with those risks, misalignment, misuse, etc.?
Yeah. Does knowing about a hedging feature or a located within circuit make AI safer?
Well, the idea is that these tools give you unprecedented visibility. Dario describes experiments they've run internally.
Like?
They'd have one team, a red team, deliberately introduce a subtle safety problem into a model, maybe make it slightly sycophantic or prone to exploiting a loophole.
Okay, sneak in a flaw.
Then other teams, blue teams, would have the task of finding that problem without knowing what it was beforehand.
And could they find it? Using these interpretability tools.
Some blue teams did successfully use feature analysis and circuit tracing tools to pinpoint the problematic behavior and its internal cause. So it shows promise for debugging and assurance.
Okay, so it's moving from pure science towards engineering tools for safety.
That's the trajectory. The ultimate long-term ambition is pretty grand.
Which is?
To be able to do a full brain scan or checkup on any advanced AI before deployment.
A checkup for what?
For all sorts of things. Tendencies toward lying, power-seeking behavior, specific vulnerabilities to jailbreaking, maybe even mapping its entire cognitive profile, its strengths, weaknesses, biases.
Wow. Like a pre-flight check, but for an AI's mind.
Exactly. Dario uses the medical analogy again. Just like an MRI helps diagnose disease, leading to treatment, interpretability could become the diagnostic tool for AI safety.
Allowing us to test models rigorously and deploy them with much higher confidence, maybe reaching what they call AI safety level 4.
That's the hope. It ties directly back to enabling the safe development and use of really powerful AI. This isn't just academic curiosity. It could be essential for our future.
It really feels critical. But there's a catch, isn't there? Something about timing.
Yeah, there's a definite sense of urgency in Dario's piece. He sounds optimistic about the science. He thinks we could have reliable MRI for AI tools within, say, 5 to 10 years.
Okay, 5-10 years sounds manageable.
Maybe. But the problem is AI capabilities are advancing even faster, much faster, potentially.
How fast are we talking?
He raises the prospect and acknowledges it's speculative, but based on current trends, that we might see AI systems with compute power equivalent to a, quote, country of geniuses in a data center, possibly as soon as 2026 or 2027.
A country of geniuses
Right.
by 2027. That's incredibly soon.
It is. And his point is that deploying powerful systems, potentially much smarter than us in many domains, while still being largely ignorant of how they work, that's basically unacceptable in his view.
So the MRI machine needs to be ready before the super patient arrives, basically.
Precisely. It's a race between interpretability, our understanding, and the sheer intelligence and capability of the models themselves.
And right now, who's winning the race?
Well, capabilities are definitely advancing rapidly, but every step forward in interpretability gives us a bit more ground, incrementally improves our ability to check and understand these systems. We need to accelerate the interpretability side.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we tip the scales in favor of understanding? Dario suggests some concrete actions, right?
He does. 3 main areas. First, a direct call to action for AI researchers.
What's the call?
Basically, get involved. Work on interpretability. Whether you're in a big company, academia, a nonprofit, he argues this work is critically important, maybe even more important right now than just building bigger models.
Focus on understanding, not just scaling.
Yes. And he highlights that the recent progress, especially around circuits, offers really promising directions. Anthropic itself is doubling down, aiming for reliable problem detection tools by 2027, and they're funding startups.
And he wants other big labs, Google DeepMind, OpenAI, to put more resources in too.
Definitely. He suggests they should see it not just as a safety measure, but maybe even a competitive advantage, building more reliable, understandable AI.
And it's not just for big labs, right? He mentioned academics and others.
Yeah, he makes a strong point that interpretability research is often well-suited for university labs or independent folks. It has a basic science feel, and some parts don't need the absolutely massive compute power that training giant models requires.
So more accessible in some ways.
Potentially, yes. He explicitly encourages people from other scientific fields, especially neuroscience, to consider jumping in. Anthropic even has open positions specifically for this.
Okay, so action 1. More researchers focusing on interpretability. What's action 2?
Governments. But he advocates for light touch rules, not heavy-handed regulation of the science itself.
Light touch how?
His main suggestion is mandating transparency. Companies building powerful AI should have to publicly disclose their safety practices, like a responsible scaling policy, and crucially, explain how they are using interpretability tools to test their models.
So forced disclosure to create incentives. A race to the top on safety practices.
That's the idea. Make safety and interpretability efforts visible and comparable. He mentions proposing this in California, but sees potential for federal or even international adoption.
Okay, transparency mandates. What's the third action?
This one's about hardware. Export controls on advanced AI chips, particularly to China.
Right, those have been in the news. How does that help interpretability?
Well, Dario's main reason for supporting them is strategic, keeping democracies ahead in AI. But he points out a vital secondary benefit for safety.
Which is?
It creates a potential security buffer. By slowing down the absolute cutting edge of AI development globally, it gives interpretability research more time to catch up before we reach potentially uncontrollable levels of AI capability everywhere.
So it buys time for the MRI development by slightly slowing down the patient's growth? Even a year or two could matter.
He argues that even a 1-2 year lead in capability, relative to when the most powerful systems become widespread, could be incredibly valuable for getting interpretability tools ready. It reduces the risk of everyone hitting superintelligence simultaneously with no safety net.
Okay, that makes sense. So more research, transparency rules, and strategic export controls.
Right, and he stresses these are all good ideas independently, but together they significantly boost the chances of interpretability keeping pace with AI power.
So wrapping it all up, the core message from Dario Amodei seems crystal clear. We absolutely have to understand these powerful AI systems we're building.
Yeah, understanding their inner workings isn't just nice to have, it's becoming essential, especially before they start to fundamentally change our world in ways we can't predict.
And it's encouraging that progress is being made on the interpretability front, even if there's this race against time.
Definitely. The science is moving, tools are being built, but the urgency he conveys is palpable. We need to accelerate that understanding.
It certainly leaves you thinking, doesn't it? What are the real ethical lines when we deploy technology that's getting exponentially more powerful but remains largely a black box?
And on the flip side, imagine the world we could build if we do crack this. If interpretability allows us to safely unlock the full, incredible potential of advanced AI for science, for medicine, for everything, what could that future look like?
Definitely something to keep thinking about long after this deep dive.